Software updates in time can radically change the experience a smartphone provides, and with the OnePlus 8 Pro, it has. Welcome to my 1 month later review of the OnePlus 8 Pro. Let's dive right in. OnePlus has always kind of had a special place in my heart. The OnePlus 2 was one of the first smartphones that I ever bought to review on this channel, and my first time meeting subscribers in real life happened at a OnePlus event. And I think that a lot of people feel this special attachment to OnePlus as a brand because since their existence, they've been trying to provide consumers an amazing smartphone experience that's really similar to the competitors while undercutting them. But what happens when you change your mission statement from being the flagship killer to being the $899 flagship? Well, OnePlus has opened up that door for us to explore it, and it's mostly good news. This phone has mostly been a joyride to use, but there are some implications with that price, and I will mention those at the end of this video. This kind of feels like the iPhone of the Android world, meaning that the software and the hardware work really well together. With some phones, it kind of feels like software is like an afterthought for the manufacturer, but with OnePlus, in a lot of ways, the software kind of feels like the star of the show. It's extremely smooth, and there are some hardware features that are baked into the software, like the ringer switch, and that's really nice to see. The software is also near stock, which is definitely my preference. Oxygen OS is one of my favorite Android skins of all time. The hardware is also pretty stellar. The back looks so nice with that rebranding, and although there is a pretty significant camera bump, I know that most people don't really care about that, and a case will fix all of the wobble that you get when you put it on the surface, so that's all I'm gonna say about the camera bump. I also really like this solid paint job. While it does reflect some color, it's very different than like the mirror-like finish found on the OnePlus 8 that I have, review of that coming soon, and I just think it looks a lot better, and it doesn't really show fingerprints, which I am a huge fan of, and I also just really like this color. It's a super rich color. This may be my favorite color on a smartphone ever, which is a big statement, but this phone is deserving of it. I am in love with this color. The phone is big with a 6.7-inch display, but not in a bad way. You just have to know that it's more of a two-handed experience than a one-handed experience. My only real critique of this phone is the curved display. Can we make these like not a thing anymore? Like, I know that Samsung has done it for a long time, but they started phasing it out after some negative feedback, and I think that OnePlus should do the same and make the curves less severe, because although from afar it looks really nice and futuristic and clean, the actual user experience with it is none of those things. And although it has gotten better since the initial reviews were released with some software updates, I still find that I do get accidental touches when I'm using the phone one-handed, and it also makes me question durability a little bit because the display is going over the edges. So hopefully next year they go with a flatter display. That is definitely my preference. The display is beautiful though. It has great colors, great brightness, great resolution. Oh, and it's a high refresh rate, 120 Hz, which I am stoked about. Now, the law of diminishing return definitely applies here. Like, the jump from 60 to 90 feels a lot more significant than the jump from 90 to 120. But there definitely is a little bit of a difference, and it is nice to have that 120 Hz option. I would love though in the software if they gave you the option to go to 90 Hz instead, because that would definitely help a little bit with the battery life. But I love that they give the option to do 120 Hz with 1440p. This has now officially become my favorite display on a smartphone to date. I really like it a lot, and a lot of the applications that I use have a lot of swiping involved, so that means that this definitely impacts my daily life with a smartphone, like scrolling through Instagram and Twitter. It all feels extremely smooth. I'm just a really big fan of 120 Hz, and I'm happy to see it on this phone. And the specs are there to back it. Like, they are really there. You have the Snapdragon 865, support for 5G, Wi-Fi 6, 8 or 12 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage. The higher end storage and RAM model is also only an $100 increase, so this phone is loaded. And that on-paper powerhouse translates to a powerhouse in real life. It handles everything I throw at it now with ease, and there is definitely headroom for the future. Gaming feels great on this phone, but I do gotta mention that I am probably the worst gamer you'll ever meet in your whole life, so take that a little bit with a grain of salt, but I have heard from actual gamers that it feels smooth, and when I've tried it out playing Asphalt 9 just for fun, it has felt really nice. So thumbs up on that front. And also the specs mean that for simpler things like emailing or web browsing and stuff like that, the phone flies, it feels really fast, and the animations in Oxygen OS are also fast, so this phone just feels incredibly fast all the time. OnePlus will bump down the refresh rate though, depending on what application you're in, but I haven't really noticed that actually affecting my life, so I think that they're doing it in a good way. Okay, onto the camera, which is normally the weak spot of OnePlus phones. Like, if you watch any of my other OnePlus phone reviews, you'll hear me rave about a bunch of things, but then when I get to the camera, it's kind of mediocre. But that is not the case this year. This is a flagship level camera, kind of like on par with the S20, although the S20 Ultra definitely has superior zoom range. This phone has the ability to zoom up to 30x, but I wouldn't. but anywhere between like 3 and 10x is pretty useful. And I also want to say, obviously I'm staying home right now, as all of you are too, so I wasn't able to like extensively test this camera in the way that I normally would in like an MBT style camera comparison, but in the photos that I did take, I was pretty happy with them. The primary lens is great. It tends to overexpose sometimes a little bit, but nothing severe. And also in terms of color tone, sometimes it adds in magenta hues that shouldn't be there, and I see that a lot on a bunch of Android phones. So with skin tones, it's still not my favorite camera, but for the most part, the images look really good. And when you go to the ultra wide, it's also really good, which is not common. Oftentimes you'll see on phones, the primary is really good, and then the manufacturer includes the ultra wide to market that, but there's a huge quality dip when you go to that. I do not get that on the OnePlus 8 Pro. It's using the same sensor that the OnePlus 7T primary camera used, so the quality is really good for an ultra-wide lens. It also has a fourth lens, which is a color filter lens, which I'm just gonna be honest with you, I have never wanted to use it. I don't think that it is really useful for me, and I actually would have preferred, if this influenced the price at all, to not have it and to have the phone be a little cheaper. I don't really think it's that valuable, but maybe it is for you, and if it is, it's here. I don't think it's gonna get adopted onto major smartphones though. It has not like changed my camera experience. The video quality is also pretty good. It's definitely not iPhone level. I still think that iPhones have the best video quality, but focus, especially over the course of updates and this month, has been really consistent in video, and I'm pretty happy with it as a video camera. And low light is also pretty good, but I find that sometimes with like the in-between conditions, like not good light, but not like night light, it struggles a little bit with some softness, especially on the selfie lens. But on the whole, this is a pretty good camera package, and I'm happy to say that on a OnePlus phone. It's definitely not holding the phone back. And then there's the battery, and battery life is pretty good. It's a 4,510 milliamp hour battery, so it's definitely not huge, but I find myself making it through the whole day. Like, it can last me definitely all day, which is great. Now, there are so many variables that affect your battery life, like what screen on time and everything you're gonna get, like what refresh rate you decide to use, what resolution you decide to use, what applications you're using, your cellular connectivity. So it's hard for me to say exactly how much battery life you will get, but I think that it won't be a huge problem, especially when you add in the fact that this has some really good charging options. So this is the first OnePlus phone to have wireless charging, which I'm amped to say, but there is a caveat with it. And it's that if you want the 30-watt fast wireless charging, you need to use the $70 stand from OnePlus. It's proprietary tech. So that's a little bit of a bummer. And if you don't use it on that stand, you're only going to get 5-watt Qi wireless charging, which is a little bit slow. And if you put any other phone on that OnePlus stand, you're not going to get the 30-watt fast charging. But the stand is nicely engineered. There's some fans in it to keep the thermals optimal to get that fast charging. So that's nice to see. But if it's not your cup of tea, it still has regular wired warp charge, which is extremely fast. So definitely excited about the charge speeds on this phone and the fact that it has wireless charging. Hopefully next year though, they make it a little bit faster with regular Qi charging. Okay, here are some other important things that I think you should know before buying this phone. The speakers are really nice and crisp. There's a hole punch cutout in the top left, which definitely looks less futuristic than the pop-up camera, but it probably enabled the IP68 water resistance rating that this phone has, which is a trade-off that I'm willing to make. And with the refresh rate, the software also has a motion smoothing mode, which you can turn on, but I personally thought it looked a little bit weird, so I left it off. And finally, the price. We have to talk about it because it is significant, as it takes the OnePlus 8 Pro out of the flagship killer arena. But they're actually still undercutting many flagships pretty significantly. Like, this phone is a lot less than the S20 Ultra, making it one of the easiest phones to recommend right now. But I also think that we have to acknowledge that now we live in a world where Apple is producing a cheaper phone than OnePlus in the United States. And I just addressed that entire situation and also reviewed the iPhone SE2. So if you want to check out that video, you should click right here. Subscribe right here, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Another video about tech, OnePlus 8 and 851 review coming very soon. Thanks for watching this one. Bye.